Hello and welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Outreach Teen and Family Services is hosting a webinar called Starting the 504 and IEP Process. So we are going to get started. Our webinar this evening is for information and educational purposes only, but we have a lot of good information and educational resources available. And this is something that we're really hopeful that you're going to take away with some new information that you can utilize really in your daily life. So a little bit about Outreach Teen and Family Services. We have been in the Mount Lebanon area for 47 years now. We offer individual counseling services as well as educational programs. Our professional therapist approach is really centered around providing counseling, care, and connection. Our vision here at Outreach Teen and Family Services is we want every child, teen, and family to thrive. So all of our programming and our counseling services are surrounded by that vision. I will be your facilitator this evening for the webinar. My name is Maggie Zangara, and I am the program manager as well as a counselor here at Outreach Teen and Family Services. I graduated from Duquesne University School Counseling Program, and I am currently a certified school counselor as well as a certified national counselor. My counseling approach is holistic and strength-based in nature, and the framework that I follow is cognitive behavioral therapy. I have experience working in the school setting, like I said, as a school counselor, and was involved in the discussions as well as implementation of 504 and IEP plans. And I advocate for my clients if I think there is a need for a program of that nature, or a plan, I should say, of that nature, to work with their families currently as a counselor to help facilitate that discussion. So really, just to summarize my experience, my professional experience is surrounding working with children, youth, and families within the home and school setting with developmental, school, and family problems. We are so fortunate tonight to have Karen Randall here with us. Karen, thanks so much for joining us for this webinar as our presenter. Would you like to introduce yourself and allow us to learn a little bit more about you?
Of course, Maggie, it's my pleasure to be here this evening and have this joint webinar. I think that our mission and our objectives are very much similar and in line with one another. My background is in the legal field. I was an attorney in both private and corporate practice, in business and regulatory and compliance areas for over 30 years. I have been in the special education advocacy area for about 12 years now. And that started as a personal journey for me, as it does for a lot of the advocates. I had an experience with my own daughter, who is now a young adult, which led me to the place where I think some of you, if not all of you, may be now, where you are looking for information, looking for information, looking for support, looking for resources. And in doing so for myself, I realized a couple of things. First of all, that myself, even as an attorney and a very involved parent, was not aware of a lot of the things that I needed to know to be the best advocate for my child. And the flip side of that I was luckier than most,
Mhm.
Once I was able to get the information that I needed, we were able to find a very good path for Mackenzie. But um, that is why I am here where I am today, and that is to create more of a general awareness for other parents out there, and to help them get to a better place to be able to best advocate for their students. A word that you're going to hear me use a lot today is collaborator.
Mhm.
I'm not a school basher. We're not here to
Mhm.
say we don't agree with the school, or the school is not doing a good job. We are here to, I'm here to help train parents to become an effective member of the school team to advocate for their students' best interest.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, I would love, and Karen, I think so, this would be helpful for both of us to get to know a little bit more about our audience that we have here with us. As this is a live webinar that also is being recorded, so you can view it on Outreach Teen and Family Services YouTube page in the future. So yes, here's our poll. It popped up. It should pop up on your screen now. And we would love to get to know our audience a little bit more. So please go ahead and answer the question. What do we have? Who do we have with us this evening? Wonderful. Well, it looks like we have some veterans joining always, but are always open to learning. That is great, as well as some people who are starting this process. We're so happy that you are joining us, as really this webinar is all about how to effectively start discussions about 504 and IEP plans. All right. So I'm going to hit stop sharing here. Ooh, and we're gonna keep going. So here's our agenda for this evening. We're gonna start by discussing some common warning signs, and then Karen is going to really use the bulk of the webinar to discuss what requesting an evaluation would look like, as well as the timeline for an evaluation. And we are going to help understand better the similarities and differences between a 504 and an IEP plan. Our goal is to leave the last 15 minutes for a Q&A portion of our webinar, as well as ending on a positive note with strategies for success when starting the 504 and IEP process. So first, I'm going to talk a little bit about student warning signs. Now here you can tell is a list. This is just for informative purposes only. Nothing that I'll be saying is going to be diagnosing any students or behavioral identifiers or anything like that. Um, but, and when I'm talking about these warning signs, I think it could be helpful to keep 3 words in the back of your head. One would be frequency. So when we're looking at changes or disturbances, say in sleep, we want to try to think about how frequent are these changes or problems occurring. Is it happening randomly or one time out of 20, or is this something that's happening on almost a day-to-day basis? Also, it's important to take into consideration the word duration. When it comes to the mental health field, as a counselor myself, when I'm working with a new client and getting to know what they're experiencing, I like to try to ask questions and have a time frame in mind of 3 to 6 months. So are these social changes happening for the past 3 to 6 months, or is it something that is more sporadic than that? Duration is a word that is important to keep in mind when starting to identify warning signs in your child or in a student. Lastly, intensity is are these changes causing or impacting your child's life in some way? Are they having a poor academic performance in school because of some of these problems or changes? Is the family system becoming disrupted because of what's occurring? When intensity is a word to keep in mind as well. So, quickly, just to run through some of these common warning signs, emotional changes is something that would be important to have an idea if this is something that your child is experiencing. Are you seeing mood changes? Is your child becoming more irritable about things that they weren't irritable about before? Are they crying on a more frequent basis? Are they withdrawn? Are they showing are they acting out more? These are all different types of emotional changes. Social changes. Do you find that your child who used to participate in soccer and in volleyball now doesn't want to participate in any sports or extracurricular activities? Are they finding excuses to withdraw themselves or to not leave the home? These are all different types of identifiers that they may be experiencing social changes that could be a warning sign that something bigger is going on. Physical changes. This is something that it's really important to look for patterns and keep in mind frequency and duration, because there's a lot of other reasons why physical changes could be something that your child is experiencing. However, if they're reporting having nauseousness on a frequent basis, dizziness, headaches, racing heart, these could be identifiers of panic attacks or anxiety, or something is going on here and their needs aren't being met. The last one I really want to touch on here is sleep disturbances. Research shows that proper and healthy sleep hygiene is so important for children and youth physical and mental well-being. They should be really getting around 12 to, well, 8 to 12 hours of sleep. Most children probably aren't getting 12, but around at least 8 to 9 hours of quality sleep at night. If you find that your child is reported having difficulty falling asleep, staying asleep, sleeping too little, sleeping too much, these are all identifiers of sleep disturbances that would be important to document. As you can tell here from this list, there are some other common warning signs: school refusal, poor school performance. If you're noticing a decrease in academic performance, getting lower grades, or not enjoying any aspect of school, those could be signs that it's important to have a conversation about what your child is experiencing or how they are behaving. Are they obsessed with perfection? Are they catastrophizing, which is a word that is used in the counseling profession, which means accustomed to assuming the worst and thinking a lot about worst case scenarios? These are some common signs that it may be helpful. And if you have this gut feeling that my child is experiencing multiple of these signs, it could be time to do something about that and to reach out for added support within the school system. So, on that note, Karen, why don't you take it away here? If a child is starting to experience for around 3 to 6 months, multiple of these warning signs, what would be some helpful next steps for parents to consider?
Well, Maggie, a couple of the things that I'm going to suggest, most parents are probably already doing for their children in some fashion already, but would be very helpful to keep track of the warning signs that you mentioned and the frequency, duration, or intensity.
Mhm.
It would be to keep a journal.
Yeah.
Keep a journal that keeps track of their behavior at home, as
Mhm.
well as their behavior as they um, recite it to you from school. So say, for example, when they get home from school and you ask, how were things today? If you can get them to respond at all, I would try to keep track of their responses, because these are the kind of things that, even though we think we can remember these and how frequently they happen, that is very hard to do, especially when we have a lot of things going on in our lives. So
Mhm.
keep a journal and start it now. You may not need it or think you need it right now, but it certainly doesn't hurt, and it would be best to start it as soon as possible. And again, the
Mhm.
kind of things you would want to put in there, their behavior at home. Do they do they give you a very hard time about doing homework?
Mhm.
And why is that? Is it because they're tired? Is it because it takes them too long? Is this every day that this happens? Is it every class, or is it just certain subjects where this is an issue? Do they complain more about going to school than they did
Mhm.
before? Do they have particular issues with certain classes, certain teachers, certain other students? Keep track of all these types of things. And again, in terms of what's going on at school, same sort of things. Are they complaining about one class more than another, and what specifically are they complaining about? Do they not understand the teacher? Can they not hear the teacher? um, is something distracting them in one of the classes, or more than one of the classes? So these are all the kind of things that you would want to keep in that journal. um,
Mhm.
Similarly, another thing that you want to start and keep is a binder. Just get a big old binder or folder and organize it in a way that's going to be most helpful to you. Include such things as medical records. So say you have, the summary of their last visit from the pediatrician,
Mhm.
particularly if there's been any discussion of any issues that could impact their academics, like ADHD, for example. Obviously, if you've had an outside evaluation from a psychologist or neuropsychologist, that's something that you would obviously want to keep. Otherwise, things from school, the report cards, test scores, work samples that demonstrate their struggle, or homework.
Mhm.
Um, all these things would or could be data or evidence to use to support your request, and
Mhm.
to support your position going forward. You want to, as much as possible in this journey, be able to have this kind of information to empower you, as well as information regarding your rights, your legal rights,
Mhm.
um, under the IEP and 504, as opposed to exerting your emotions as much as possible. And it is difficult, but as much as possible, you want to take your emotions out of it so that you can set a good example for your child.
Mhm.
Now, once you've started these things, the first step should be what should come naturally to you. And that should be to reach out to the student's teacher or counselor if you haven't already done so. You want to be as specific as possible about potential issues. Of course, you want this to be in writing, as you want everything along the way to be in writing. In most cases, this probably would be an email. You want to make sure you have a copy. You want to make sure that you are clear to that staff member what you would expect as far as a response, time frame, and are you looking for, whether or not they agree, and or whether or not they have any suggestions as to, first kind of actions that could be taken. Now, once and the reason that you want to do this before you actually start the official process, if you can, is because you want to remember that these relationships have to be ongoing. So you want to have a good working relationship with that teacher, with that counselor. You don't want them to think that you are disregarding them and you are jumping over them, if you will. If, however, whether you don't get a response in the time frame that you set, you get one that's not satisfactory to you, or they don't agree with you, and you make the decision that it is time to actually make your official evaluation, you need to do so again in writing. We've actually attached a sample letter for you, which really kind of puts you in a good position to make sure you have the information that you need in there. You can make slight changes if you need to. Know that this can be done at any time.
Yes.
You want to make sure that if you don't need to wait, for example, to get that response, if you haven't gotten it within the time frame, or if you feel that things have become more urgent, you can do that request for evaluation at any time.
And just a note, we will be able to also send the sample letter to everyone who's in attendance tonight. I think that is a great document to have to help really with these beginning discussions and reaching out to a teacher or school counselor, like you said, Karen.
Right. And so, you're stressed out enough about making that general decision about whether to go forward. You don't need to have to worry about from a legal standpoint, what words do I need to put in and what words don't I want to put in. So that's why sample letters like this are really helpful. Now, in full disclosure, when we first talked about doing this webinar, we were going to focus on the differences between an IEP and 504 plan. But in thinking about it from the parent's perspective, we realized that the steps that you take to get to that point of actually going forward and requesting one of these plans is by far one of the most important decisions that you will make in your child's academic success. So what we're doing is instead focusing on how to start in one of these processes. And so what you're looking at now on the screen is a Venn diagram, and it really is just a very basic comparison of an IEP and 504. For those of you online who have started this process, you know that there are a lot more differences than this, and I'm sure you know a lot more details. This is something that if there are questions about details between the two plans, and or if anyone is interested in having a webinar in the future on this topic, of course, we'd like to know about that. For our purposes today, the thing that I would like for you to know about the differences between the two are the things that could make a difference in how you approach your request for evaluation. If you look in the sort of the middle of the diagram, the important difference between the two is what each of the processes focuses on. The IEP focuses on what the student is learning, as opposed to the 504, which focuses more on how the student is learning, and it provides accommodations to accomplish that. Examples of accommodations would be where the student is sitting in the room. do they need to sit closer to the teacher? Do they need to sit further away from other students so they're not distracted? Do they need more time to complete tests or to um, do their homework, or do they need less homework, for example? Now, on the flip side, on the IEP side, it's more about what the student is learning. So you would be looking at much more substantive things there. Like, for example, if the student has difficulty with reading, if their disability is related to reading, an example might be that they would receive specific reading training in addition to the other work that the students are doing in the classroom. And that would be true, regardless of what the disability is. It's going to be much more focused on that specific disability. And the other thing to know about the IEP over the 504 is that there's much more structure. There's much more structure that is set up by the law that from which the IEP is originated. So that is something that, for the most part, I believe is a benefit, unless that's something that your student doesn't need.
Mhm, mhm. Well, actually, before we keep going, Karen, I know we are saying a lot of content, and I'm wondering, how is everybody feeling right now? Are you overwhelmed yet? Why don't we take a little bit of time here, answer this question for us, just so we are able to better understand how you're processing the information tonight, and how are you doing? Doing okay. Okay, thank you for that answer. Awesome, doing okay. Overwhelmed, overload. This is overwhelming. The nature of talking about 504 and IEP plans is emotional and comes with also a lot of information. So that makes a lot of sense. When I was learning about 504 and IEP plans myself in the professional realm, I was feeling overwhelmed as well. Well, thank you so much for those responses. All right, Karen.
Okay, well, moving along. Once we've taken that first step,
Mhm,
we've actually, we're creating our data, our evidence. What you want to do, again, is to formally request an evaluation for either an IEP or 504 plan from the school. And this really needs to be in writing. I know that I say everything should be in writing. This really needs to be in writing. Again, as we've mentioned, we have a sample letter attached for you. You can send this request at any time.
mhm,
So if you've not heard from the school, if you're dissatisfied with what you've heard from the teacher, you can do the evaluation. I would just recommend that you give the teacher or the counselor a heads up to let them know you're doing so that they feel as though they're a part of the process.
mhm,
You may get a diagnosis or an evaluation done outside of the school before requesting the evaluation, and it all depends upon your particular situation. But know that even if you've done that, the school will still conduct its own evaluation. So if you're concerned about timing,
mhm,
and you haven't already gotten an outside evaluation done, it may very well be in your best interest to make the request of the school, get the time running, get the time clock running, as we'll show you in a minute, and see what comes back in the school evaluation. I'm not going to get into any detail here, but know that you do have an opportunity, if you do not agree with the school's evaluation, to ask for an independent ask for the school to pay for an independent evaluation be done after you have their evaluation. However, if you have your own diagnosis, I mean, obviously that's something you would want to let the school know, and could be discussed before they do their evaluation, so that that way you could determine maybe if you could have them, if they would agree that, some of the general evaluation has been done, and if they want to focus on more specifics, that's something that could in fact happen.
Mhm. Well, let's move on. And I think it could be helpful to talk and to really show like what does the evaluation and timeline look like. So,
What you're
yeah.
looking at for the most part, now going back to what I said before about how the IEP is there are a lot more specific requirements and timelines that apply to the IEP than the 504.
Mhm,
Um, the the law specifically requires that once the school has received the formal request for an evaluation for an IEP, and once the parent has signed a parental consent, it's important for
mhm,
you to know that you're probably going to be asked, you should be asked to do a parental consent for the school to be able to do the evaluation. There's a 10-day time frame in which the school needs to start the process. And once that 10 days has passed and they have the parental consent, there's a 60-day time frame in which the school has to get the evaluation done and to get the report done and to the parents. And that 60 days sounds like a lot, but there really is a lot that the school needs to get accomplished, especially in light of all the other things that that they have going on in the school. So that's what you're looking at. Even though the 504 plan does not have that specific requirement that applies to it, the schools typically follow that same time frame for the request for
mhm,
504s. And there is a difference, very briefly again, between what the schools will do to determine eligibility for 504 and the IEP. And it goes back to the focus of the plans. The IEP, because it has to be so much more specific, because it's going to the actual things that the student is learning, they have to do, as we said, an actual evaluation. So that is going to, that's going to mean, from a practical standpoint, you know, probably having your student take time out of their school day for these evaluations to take place.
mhm,
The 504 plan does not usually have the same sorts of specific evaluations, but they still will want to talk with and observe the child as well as interview the parents, child's teacher, and other school staff.
mhm,
So those are the two main differences there. One other quick thing to note: if you request an evaluation for an IEP and they find that you are not eligible for an IEP, they typically will still consider whether you are eligible for a 504 plan. So I think that's good to know. If the reverse is not always true. If you ask just for a 504, they're not necessarily going to, go outside the box and say, oh, they're really eligible for an IEP.
mhm,
So just know that from a practical standpoint, as well, as far as, when you're making your decision about what you should be asking for.
mhm,
Again, this chart, I think, just lays out what we talked about already, the 10 days and then the 60 days, but we thought it would be helpful for you to have it sort of in this format. So, um, you know exactly what it is that you're looking at. One thing we feel pretty strongly about is that you really, as a parent, know your child better than anyone else. And so that's why keeping the journal, keeping the binder, all of those things are so important. You're such a vital part of the
mhm,
team. And in terms of timing, it's as I said before, I think one of the hardest things is for a parent to decide when to take that first step.
mhm,
You really need to trust your gut. And even though, listening to Maggie's advice, you don't want to pull the trigger too soon. On the
mhm,
other hand, if you feel that something is wrong with your child and they need the additional support in school, you should listen to your gut. So I think that's, probably one of the most important things that I could leave you with. And going back to my own personal situation and seeing many other parents go through it, that is one of the things that we struggle with the most.
Mhm. Well, I think we have around 10 minutes before our Q&A portion. So I think it could be helpful to talk more about tips for success now that there is a general understanding between the differences and the similarities of a 504 and IEP plan, as well as what requesting an evaluation looks like, as well as those timelines and those 10 days, 60 days that you spoke on, Karen. What are some tips for success to help parents make this journey and this process go as smoothly as it can?
Well, I think one of the general things to remember is that this is this is a journey. It's
Mhm,
not, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
mhm,
You will, if in fact your child does have is eligible for one of these plans, you will you may have good days and bad days. And I think that's really hard um, for uh, for a lot of us. We because we may fix one thing, and then because there are a lot of what they call comorbidities,
mhm,
so that if your child has one disability, chances are very good that they also have another or perhaps several more disabilities, and they don't always come out at the same time. And I think a good example of that, and maybe Maggie, you could address this a little bit more, is anxiety and how
mhm,
that's one of the types of issues that is very, while it can be seen on its own,
mhm,
it very often, just as a result of the experience, ends up being an additional issue for most of these students. So um, that's one thing that I think we all need to remember. And the other is that we need to have a strategy.
mhm,
You want, again, you want to be and as empowered as possible. The school has a structure. That's what they do. And for those of you who are veterans, you will know how it feels to walk into a meeting and be surrounded by school members and to be outnumbered. But it is possible for you to be armed with your data, with your evidence, with information, to be able to show the team that you can in fact participate with that team, on a level playing field. And part of that is knowing your overall and long-term sort of strategy. So even though you might, you need to look at each step at a time, it is always important to understand what your next step should be
mhm,
in light of what the school's next steps would be. So all of this information is, this knowledge is out there, it is available. We've given you some resources here. You see at the
mhm,
bottom of the page. These are two really good websites, and there are a lot more out there as well. The Patan website it's the first go-to because it's an
yeah,
official website. It supports the Special Education Bureau of Pennsylvania for both, the schools and the parents. You go there and they have everything categorized. So chances are you will be able to find at least something on the topic that you're looking for there. The other is Understood. It is a nonprofit. It too is a very good website. And then I will also add that once you have defined the disability that applies to your, to your student, you can find a lot more specific information out there about specific disabilities very simply by going online and Googling what it is that you're looking for.
Mhm, mhm. And I can also, once it is our Q&A portion, put these wonderful resources in the chat feature. So if you would like to just click on the link and go from there and bookmark some of these resources, you can certainly do so. Always, always trust your gut. If you feel something is wrong, it's because it usually is. I think this is, something that we really, Karen and I feel passionate about leaving with you from this webinar. We can talk about warning signs, we can talk about the process, but ultimately every child is an individual, and you as the parents are with them the most, know them the best, and trusting your gut is going to be um, invaluable when it comes to this process and navigating it as best as possible for your child.
And Maggie, I think the thing that I see that I saw myself again, and
Mhm.
I've seen so almost so consistently in so many of the parents that I've worked with over the years, is that um, there is a hesitancy to move
Mhm.
forward for a lot of reasons. We don't, we are somewhat in a sense of denial. We don't want to believe that there's an issue. We want to think that we're imagining it and it will get better or whatever. But
Mhm.
that, I think the way that we need to look at it is, and another thing I want to point out, and this too, I think is really important. Most of us feel that we should and could trust the schools to tell us if something is wrong. Again, I'm not talking badly about the schools. I'm just talking from a practical standpoint. Bottom line is, while they have a legal requirement to identify the students that do need the special help and are eligible for those two processes, it doesn't always happen. And even when it does happen, it's not always with the same urgency that we would like to see it happen. And again, it's because of, the number of things that are going on in the schools and the structure that they have to work within. So I think just remember that. Don't hesitate or wait because you think the school is going, if there was something wrong, that the school would do something, because that is not necessarily um, the right approach.
Mhm. Well, I think this would be a great time to have our Q&A portion of our webinar. So please make comments or ask questions in the chat feature here on Zoom. I will be opening it now. All right, wonderful. It looks like the two resources have been added to the chat to Patan, the website from the state that can be really helpful to find additional resources, as well as understood.org. So if anyone has any questions, comments, or concerns, we have left some time at the end here to answer or to have a discussion about your thoughts or any questions you may have. So I'm not seeing any right now, but feel free to ask if you would like. And Karen, as maybe we're waiting for some questions, I wonder, since you do have experience working with, oh, it looks like a question did come through here. So let's answer this one before mine.
Cool.
Any tips for preparing for an IEP meeting? Kim asked.
There is a ton of information out there, Kim, and if you want to reach out to me directly afterwards, I'd be glad to give you some resources. Or, I mean, again, as I had sort of thrown out there early on, I think that's a great, that's a great place to start with another
Mhm.
webinar. If Kim, there are lots of, if you even just, Google IEP meetings, you will find that there's a lot of really helpful information out there. Understood will have some, you will find lists of things to do, list of questions that you will want to ask, general types of questions. And again, you definitely want to go prepared with having your data, your evidence
Mhm.
together. And a couple of more specific comments about that. You will want to be able to access that information as easily as possible in the meeting, so that if you start talking about something, or the school starts talking about something and you say, oh, wait, I know I have some information to support that or contrary to that, you want to be able to find it as easily as
Mhm.
possible in that meeting. So you want to set up your binder either chronologically, and then within the time frame set up categories, or you want to start it with categories, like, say, for example, have all of their report cards or have all of their evaluations, and then within those categories set it up chronologically, whatever works best for you. But if that worked, the reason you want to do that is obviously so that you can use it and to support your position, but it also shows the other team members that you know what you're doing, you're serious,
Mhm.
and that you can be taken seriously.
Mhm.
So, for all those reasons, those are kind of the basic things you want to start out with. Um, and it all depends too, Kim, about, what kind of an IEP meeting it is. If it's the initial IEP meeting where they're determining eligibility, I mean, that is obviously a lot different than, once they have determined that there is eligibility, and, you then get on to the, it's initial. Okay.
It is initial. Okay.
Okay, Kim, I think it would be helpful if you reach out to me, and my contact information is included
It'll
at,
be on our last slide when we do wrap up.
because I think I can help you, specifically with that.
Mhm. Mhm.
Anything?
It's a good point though. And I think if there is interest in a follow-up webinar about what the IEP or 504 meetings would look like and how to best prepare for that meeting, as well as what to expect and what it covers really, that's something we are both, Karen and I, open to exploring in a future webinar.
Right. And I mean, I've been involved in trainings where sometimes it's helpful to even do sort of a role play.
Mhm.
Once, if you have some idea of, honestly, initial IEP meetings could be a webinar in and of themselves, because that's where you're going to have the most detailed discussion. Once you have an IEP plan in place, then there are timeframes in which the team is required to look at it at least once a year. They're required to do a reeval at least every 3 years. Um, and that's not to say that parents can't ask for a meeting in between those times.
Mhm.
Say an issue comes up that they feel needs to be addressed, similar to asking for that first evaluation. You can ask for a meeting, in between. You can ask for a meeting in November, if you feel, that something really needs to be addressed, or you have some new information, for example. But that initial IEP meeting is really obviously very important, because that's where they determine if the student is eligible or not for the IEP.
Mhm, mhm. Good point. Well, Karen, I do wonder too if there's any common questions that you are asked from parents when it comes to advocating for their child during these types of 504 IEP meetings, or what our webinar really covered tonight, the beginning process. Are there any frequently asked questions that you tend to get?
Yes, there are.
Yeah.
And, the one question that I very often get is, why do we as parents have to initiate this process and, play such a large role in this process? And that really, first of all, under the IDEA, which is the law that established the requirement for IEP plans, it specifically requires that the parents be a member of the overall team, which makes sense. They probably thought that the parents would want to be a member. But again, I get the question a lot. Well, why do we need to do this? Isn't the school, required to give our students the education that they need?
Mhm,
And yes, that is true. And as I said, the schools are required to identify if there are special needs. However, again, if you want to have more control, as I think most of us at least would like to say that we would want to have, you need to be an active, knowing partner of that team. The school, again, they have, it's, that's their jobs, right? That's their jobs to, do what they're doing on that team with your child. And it is not your career or profession, if you will. You haven't been trained in the same way that the school team members have been. But that doesn't mean that you can't get the information, attain the knowledge to put you in a much better position. And that's one of my, real passions, is to help parents get in that position. While I am a licensed attorney in Pennsylvania and Connecticut, and I could litigate, I could, get in that adversarial position. I feel very strongly that it's in everyone's best interest to stay out of that adversarial position as long as you can, and to try to collaborate, work as a team, in the best interest of the student. And the
mhm,
more information that the parents have, the better position that they are in to do that, and the better position they are in to be able to sort of gauge what the school might, what their next step might be. So
mhm.
again, so that you can plan your overall roadmap or strategy as you go
Mhm.
through this journey.
I really think a key word here that I hear you saying multiple times, Karen, is collaborate. It's so important to collaborate with the school as much as possible to really work as a team to help achieve the goals and the plan that's most appropriate for the child and student.
And you know what it goes back to, Maggie? It goes back to the whole holistic approach as well,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? Because, what they're doing in school, of course, everyone thinks, well, what they're doing in school is the most important part of their, academic success. And, to a large degree it is, but there's also a lot that's going on at home,
Mhm.
and with their family dynamics that, plays a very big role. And
Mhm.
if this all isn't being taken into consideration, then you're not getting, you are not addressing the whole student per se.
Mhm, mhm. Yes, the full picture, the whole student is so important to take into consideration with that documentation, um, to really advocate for what is in the best interests of the child. I
Mhm.
second that. Well, if there aren't any more questions, we would like to end tonight with this is our disclaimer here with our contact information. If you would like to reach out to Outreach Teen and Family Services or Randall Advocacy, here is the needed information to do so.
And I
Karen, do you have any closing words or anything you'd like to for us to end on?
I hope that, we have at least provided some helpful information tonight. We know it's been a lot. Hopefully, at
Mhm,
least some of it is stuck. You do have, if nothing else, and you walk away with the resources, I think
mhm,
that should be beneficial to you. And you have our contact information as
mhm.
resources as well. And I know for myself, and I'm not gonna speak for Maggie, but I think it's probably true. We want I know that I myself know that I need to continuously learn in this field.
Oh, yes.
And so I know that not only do I look to, impart information to parents and others, but I I like to learn from parents. I mean, there are situations, I haven't seen everything. There are situations that I can certainly learn from. And I think it has to be that's the kind of process that it needs to be. Not
Mhm.
just another real quick thing. There are lots of parent support groups out there,
Yes.
specific to your disability, for example. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Maggie. Is there any specific that you can think of?
So I can't off the top of my head, but I do know they are out there. And I think this can feel sometimes like a more lonely journey in a sense. And I think being able to find support either with these support groups like you're talking about, Karen, or having somebody who's gone through the process before can be so helpful when it comes to empowering yourself to do what's in your child's best interest and to help empower your child because a lot of the times they will be included in the plan's development as well. And it's not easy to navigate, but that's why being as informed and having educational resources to help support in this process can be so valuable and helpful.
Absolutely.
Mhm, mhm. Well, thank you so much for joining us this evening. On behalf of Karen and I, we hope you learned something, took away something, and if you are interested in future webinars, please make sure that you stay in touch with Outreach Teen and Family Services as well as Randall Advocacy. And we do sincerely wish you a great rest of your night. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye now.
Bye.